Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Rebecca Hengalova. I am a research fellow of Europeum Institute for European Policy, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you this afternoon/evening. It is wonderful to see such a fully booked room. If there are more people coming, let's please make way for them to sit at the red bench. And I will waste not more of our time so we can get to this fantastic debate. Today's topic is affordability of housing, Café collaborations, housing accessible to all, old and young. Before we get to our distinguished speakers who are already kindly waiting, I would like to give the word to our very kind and generous cooperators. And let me please start with the director of Campus Hybenská, who are kindly hosting us today, and director of the Endowment Fund for Charles University, Mr. Tomáš Vokáč.
Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great honor and privilege to welcome you here in Campus Hybenská, which is a special place built and managed by Charles University and the municipality of Prague. Today's topic, it's a critical topic for us, for Charles University, because it's a big issue for us, housing of our students, how to give them places here in Prague in dormitories. We don't have many rooms for them. It's very difficult for them to rent flats, to stay here. It's very expensive. So this is a topic which is also introduced by Milena Vicinova, who is sitting over there and who is responsible for Café collaborations. So great topic and great discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. And I would like to thank you, our partners, Europeum, of course, the Embassy of Spain in Prague, and then Austrian Culture Forum, which are co-hosting today's discussion. So welcome, enjoy the discussion, enjoy the evening, and enjoy the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vokáč. As was already mentioned, our two other cooperating organizations are the Austrian Cultural Forum and the Embassy of Spain to Czech Republic. And from the Austrian Cultural Forum, I would like to invite Madame Denise Quistop to say a few words, if you could come up. Thank you.
Can I take this? Yes, dobrý den, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to greet you on behalf of the Austrian Cultural Forum and also the Austrian Embassy here in Prague. We are delighted about this cooperation, and we are always delighted about the interest in Austrian experiences in matters like these, in these important matters. And we are most grateful for this new cooperation that has brought this Café collaboration for us, Campus Hybenská and also Europeum. And we are used to working also with other embassies here in Prague in the context of UNIC, the network of the cultural fora here. And I want to especially thank again our partners here at Campus Hybenská, Dr. Milena Vicinova, Susanna Augustova, and Rebecca Hengelova from Europeum. The preparation was a great pleasure, and we hope this is the first of many to come. And cooperation is the important word in this context, because it's cooperation what we need to tackle all those complicated, big questions like the one we are discussing today. We need international cooperation, European cooperation, and also interdisciplinary cooperation. And we need this knowledge that is generated and represented by governments, by scientific institutions, by universities, and also relevant actors and experts like the ones that are meeting here today. As a cultural forum, all we can do is matchmaking and facilitating these kinds of cooperations. We are facilitators of cultural encounters like these, of new networks and of dialogues, because it's through dialogue that we enter into contact with the world. And through dialogues, we enhance our knowledge, our knowledge about important matters like these, but also about each other. And these dialogues, that's our understanding, and that's why we try to do them and enhance them. These dialogues do not only create trust and understanding among each other, but are also the basis for future cooperation in many fields that we have. So we're greatly looking forward to tonight's exchange of the experts from Czech Republic, from Austria, and from Spain on these matters. This topic of tonight plays, as we think, an important role when we come in a more broader sense to design future ways of living, because it touches so many relevant spheres of our lives and so many relevant topics like social inequality, energy questions, climate, food, water, security, peace in the end. And in Austrian architecture, many of you may know, as you are in contact, it's always been a good tradition to include these aspects, cultural aspects, ecological, educational, and also social aspects in architectural and urban planning thinking and experience. So I'm sure it's going to be a interesting presentation and a lively discussion, and I wish you a very interesting evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Quistop. And last but certainly not least, from the Embassy of Spain to the Czech Republic, Councillor Guillermo Rebollo Diaz will say a few words.
Thank you. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. On behalf of the Spanish Embassy, I would like to welcome you all here to this new edition of Café Collaboration. I think today is a very interesting one. We will be discussing about a very hot topic in Czech Republic and Spain, affordable, accessible housing, a topic, a matter, a problem, a challenge that touches young people, elderly, locals, migrants, expats. I think it's something which touches our real way of life, so I'm sure the discussion will bring many interesting ideas and experiences that maybe will help us to think together how to find solutions to this challenge that we are living in many capital cities of Europe. I would like to thank you especially the organizers of the event, Iberska Campus, Europeum, Carolinum University, really for thinking of Spain and allow us to have our voice, our experience heard here in this event. And of course, to our guest speakers, thank you for the expertise, your experience that you will share with us, and especially to Mikel, to the special Spanish guest, who I know he has just arrived today from Spain, getting up a little bit early maybe, but I'm sure he will be fresh to share ideas and experiences with us. Thank you very much. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now there's nothing left to do but invite these speakers. I will ask you to come up and take a seat, and then I will introduce you one by one. Perfect. We can finally sit down. So it is the topic of today's discussion has already been briefly mentioned by our distinguished speakers and partners, and it is apparent that we will be discussing many facets of what it means to make housing accessible, affordable, ecologically conscious, and fair for all, hopefully. To do that, I would like to welcome, let's take it geographically from the farthest to the nearest, Mr. Miquel Berra Sandin from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. He's an architect and urban planner focusing on urban development, housing policy, and digital transformation. And in his latest work, Miquel was analyzing housing supply dynamics, planning frameworks across 23 European areas with a special focus on Vienna and Prague. So whatever we will be discussing, you can be our fact checker. Thank you so much for making it here. On your right-hand side, our second distinguished speaker, coming from a little bit closer from Vienna, Mr. Lukas Barning from the University of Vienna. He is a geographer and planning scholar focusing on social theory, governance, and the social and political dimensions of energy systems. And he also co-leads the research network on eco-social policy and practice for innovation and transformation. I hope you have some sort of abbreviation for this, otherwise your meetings must be very, very long. Last but not least, from the alma mater of many of you from the audience, I'm certain, Madam Eliška Vejchodská from Charles University. She is an associate professor at the Faculty of Social Sciences. Her topics include land policy, environmental policy, and urban governance, and she focuses on social and environmental dimensions of urban change, and especially land value capture mechanisms. Thank you so much for making it here, despite shorter distances. For the, let's say, informal feel and intercultural feel, I would like to refer to you by your first names. This in no way decreases the value of your academic titles. So with that in mind, I would just like to spend 1 minute on housekeeping. As you can probably see from the wonderful tech that we have here, this event is being recorded, both audio and video, but it is not live streamed. If you would like to not be in the recording, please make arrangements to do so. We will be talking with our distinguished guests for about an hour with some pre-planned questions, and then we will open the floor to all of you. So if you have any question, please note it down, keep it in your mind. And then I would like to ask for you to wait for a microphone, because this event is being recorded, and so that we can hear you very well. And afterwards, we have wonderful catering and some lovely wine awaiting us in the front room. So please stay with us until the end and enjoy. With that being said, we've finally gotten through the pages and pages of introductions. And I would like to start. Eliška, if you will allow me, ladies first. Just for this one question, would you very briefly explain which administration is responsible for housing strategies in your country, so Czech Republic?
Okay, thank you. I would mention 3 ministries. Ministry of Regional Development, which for instance deals with financial support of new affordable housing units. Then Ministry of Social Affairs, dealing with the poorest and provided them the support for their housing needs. But the third one is maybe something which you do not expect, which is the Ministry of Justice, because it provides us with the civil code, and the civil code defines the rules on the rental market. And the rental market in the Czech Republic is relatively special, maybe in comparison to other countries, because it provides quite a good support, good security for renters, for the apartment owners, but very high insecurity for tenants, which make every young adult in the Czech Republic to seek for a home ownership, which is not easy at all because the prices are high. So I think the hysteria in the Czech Republic around the housing affordability, which I can understand, is partly based on this insecurity in the rental sector, because the young adults cannot live in insecure housing. It's very unpleasant. You do not know what would happen in 1 year of your rental agreement, if the rent would be increased to really high numbers, or if you might stay in your apartment securely. You never know. So I think this shapes the situation in the Czech Republic quite severely.
Thank you so much for already framing the discussion. So you've mentioned 3 institutions, one of them perhaps not the most immediately considered one, which is the Ministry of Justice. Lucas, how is it in Austria? If you could please very briefly explain the situation to us.
Yes, thanks for the invitation first and foremost. Beautiful to be here. I'd also start, of course, with the national level, and like in probably most other countries, there is no specific national institutions that is only there for shaping the housing policy. That's also a mixture between different institutions, but I think most relevant is currently the ministry that includes housing distinctively. That is Ministry for, let me just point that out, housing, culture, media and sports. So it's a pretty wide one. Interesting shape. And there is a couple of policies or a couple of legal aspects on the national level that shape like renting law and tenancy law, housing ownership, and also limited profit housing, which is, I think, a very special Austrian case, that there is a nationwide strong limited profit housing law. And then I think more importantly, the decisions are made on the federal and the state level, where you have more specific housing agencies and institutions that are there for making housing topics in those member states. And also, I think, pretty important for housing policy questions which are also regulated or managed in the states are spatial planning laws, as well as building and construction laws that really tie into how social housing can really develop. And of course, then we have Vienna as a very special case. I'm sure we have time to speak more about this situation, but that's a particularly interesting situation, as Vienna is a municipality as well as a state, and therefore has very specific administrative capacities and power. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Again, you've also given us a little bit of an overview at how many layers of governance we need to look at, as well as how many areas we need to examine. Michael, would you please also explain what it looks like in Spain, and maybe add to what your colleagues have already mentioned?
For sure, yeah. Thanks for having me, first and foremost, and thanks to you all for being here on a sunny Thursday afternoon. That's appreciated. In terms of how responsibility is shared in the housing issue in Spain, as Lucas was mentioning, yes, there's loads of layers involved. In theory, it's 3. In some cases, it can be 4. And now there's a 5th one coming. So let me get into the details. The theory, it's the national level, the regional level in 17 regions or communities, and then the local level. The thing is, it's mainly a regional competence, but there's some national laws that do detail how you have to work on that, like land law or housing law. But then the policy effort happens in the regional level mainly, which as a researcher, it's kind of nice because you have 17 different situations happening at the same time. And some of them can be really different. Like you can have places, for example, where public housing is public forever. So it's limited prices forever. In some other regions, it's for just 7 years. And after the 7th year, someone who got a public housing unit, they can sell it in market rate prices. So it's very different situations. And then you have the local level where there's urban plans and also they do some housing development and the like. But again, it's 17 systems, some of them front runners in protecting, let's say, or in more housing intervention in a sense. Some others more of a free market wheel. At the same time, the division, it's not clear. So in some cases, you see policies that are enacted in the regional level that have been later stopped because this should happen at the national level. So there's some, let's say, diversities or disparities in how this is understood, these different levels are understood. And then another big issue is that when way too many levels are responsible, no one really takes accountability. So that's a big deal where there's not a clear, let's say, understanding of who should be dealing with the topics. And then, as I was saying, it's in theory these 3 levels, But then in the specific case of Barcelona, which is the only metropolitan area that it's enacted by law in Spain, the metropolitan reality is also important, which I think should be, let's say, a pathway towards the future. Like in cities, it's interesting to see where the limits, the administrative limits are, but the realities go over this like imaginary, to say so, limits, and the issues are as stark in Prague as in the next municipality, and same in Barcelona, in Madrid, or in the large cities in Europe. And then the fifth level, which I guess we'll get into speaking about, is the European level, which since the last European election and the fairly new College of Commissioners, there is a commissioner in housing and energy. It's still not housing only, but this is going to be increasingly a European topic, and we are still like waiting to see how the European Commission will intervene or act into the housing market.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, all three of you, for kind of introducing us to the environment in which you individually are researching this topic and thinking about it. I think it also helps us frame this discussion so that we understand where all of you are coming from. And maybe to go back in this direction, so we've already kind of outlined housing is an issue of everybody, and yet very few institutions and actors take responsibility. I think it's fair to say that there is a housing crisis which is fairly prevalent across the EU. Let's focus on that scope of the world. Would you, Michael, please explain what does the housing crisis look like in your country, and mainly what are its main drivers? So maybe they're demographic, social, regulatory, or environmental. And what kind of potential impact of the crisis do you worry about the most? And this can be on a personal level or on the level that you see the greatest impact or what you've researched. So such examples like uncertain future of cities, increase of at risk of poverty rates, or I don't know, environmental breakdown?
I mean, we might get into that, but yeah, I think to begin with, like in Spain, we shouldn't be talking about housing crisis in singular, but maybe about housing crisis in plural. We had a very different housing crisis until 2008, where there was like massive construction. Spain was building yearly as many units as France, Italy, Germany, and the UK together. So 700,000 units a year in 2006. And that broke down completely after, like, that was happening at the same time with a very, like, escalating prices in terms of, like, housing prices. And that broke down completely in 2008. Since then, like, prices fell. Many people were really indebted, and then their, like, housing unit was, like, not valued as much. So that brought big social consequences. And then since 2010 to, like, the late 2010, so 2018, more or less, housing prices were like low, but there was no housing production at all. So the whole construction industry that was really strong in Spain was, to say so, dismantled. And now in the last like 6 to 8 years, it's a time where housing prices are going up, but the construction is not happening yet. So there's a mismatch between, let's say, needs and supply. And at the same time, we are seeing a demographic pressure, especially in cities. Like Spain is, I would say, among the large countries in Europe, the one that it's like growing the most in the past 5 to 10 years in terms of population, which I find it positive because we need that for like our economy, which is growing really strongly. At the same time, like for pensions or whatever, but it's putting a pressure for sure into the housing market, and seeing like this mismatch between like big growth and how, let's say, the housing market is not responding to that, or the housing production is not responding to that, is a big challenge. And then how this is like translating into the problem, I would say, it's also creating a big generational divide where the older population, Spain traditionally has been a country of like owners, housing renters were like fewer. And normally you see this older cohort owning their own house and the younger cohort having to rent and having to pay huge, let's say, rents, and allowing them not allowing them to like save enough for a down payment to get into the, let's say, ownership path. So it's creating these pressures that might be challenging in terms of also like political and social dimensions.
Thank you. If I may ask a follow-up question, you mentioned a lot of new development, even though that has fluctuated over the last, let's say, 2 decades. What about renovation of existing buildings and units? Is there any emphasis on that, especially since you mentioned also the EU level and the EPBD directive? Yeah.
For sure, I think with the Next Generation funds, there has been a big push into renovation, and some, let's say, cities are really strong into that. Again, though, renovations do also can also create some divides in some cases, especially when you are asking, let's say, specific housing like units or communities to like apply for those renovations and maybe sometimes put the money up front. That limits quite a lot who can access to those renovations, even if the money is there and you'll get it back. Like some people cannot get into that path. So it's creating some challenges. At the same time, there's programs which more usually are led in the like regional level into, let's say, refurbishing derelict areas, and also like especially doing it not only in a physical standpoint, but also in a social, let's say, manner, so that it's joint policies in the physical, in the like housing part, urban part, and social part.
Thank you so much. So there needs to be a lot of cooperation, it seems, and you've highlighted that some of the drivers of, let's say, housing crises in Spain are the fluctuating development. There's also a generational divide that is mainly driven by financial means. Lucas, I would like to ask, what is the situation like in Austria? And if you would like to highlight the case of Vienna, since it seems to be quite different, please feel free to do so, as I'm sure we will be kind of dancing around the capitals of our countries anyway.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Just one thing I thought interesting to add, and to bring the case into conversations, that you said Spain is a country of house owners. Vienna and Austria is a prime example for a country of renters, where there is, I think, roughly a 45% of renting in all over Austria. So I think that's quite high in EU comparison, and that makes a very special situation. I would say I wouldn't dare to make a definitive statement on the severity of a housing crisis in Austria. I think comparably to other European contexts is probably less severe. But I think there is also heterogeneity. There are strong regional differences. We have parts in the countries that actually face or have lower or sinking rent prices, but also some examples of strongly rising prices. And I think the most severe situations probably in the two cities of Salzburg and Innsbruck, which are like the big cultural capitals and sports resorts. Yeah, I think so. It's heterogeneous, and also within the case of Vienna, so you see differences. But something on the drivers first, I think that's often the question of a perspective. I would say that the regulatory environment is probably the strongest driver to producing housing crisis. And with that I mean the specific context of housing markets in different states in Austria, as well as in different cities, especially in different cities. I think they differ quite substantially, the housing markets within these cities, and I think the institutional configuration of these markets, the histories, they are what really fosters these housing crises. And of course, there is also an increasing population in Austria, and especially in Vienna. The population is growing significantly, I think, over the last years. But I think that is not the thing that makes housing crisis severe. I think it's a question of the market. Yeah. So on Vienna, just some brief words. I think overall the situation is comparably good. We have the Vienna model, the quite famous Vienna model that has this extremely long, over 100 years long history of social housing that is deeply inscribed into the history of the city and in so many aspects. And I think it's a very interesting case to study, because it's not only a case of housing policies, but it's always been a case of integrated policies, of environmental policies, educational policies that all go together in this original idea of the Red Vienna from the 1920s. And it has, to some degree, had a fascinating stability up until now. With some ups and downs, of course, but this overall integrative approach, I think, is still there. And that makes this case of Vienna, some people call it a renter's paradise, really a comparably well-working situation. You have roughly 45% of the population living in subsidized or social houses. That's about like 25% municipal housing and 20% subsidized housing, especially low profit housing associations. And then you have about 20% living in privately organized flats, and another 20-30% in their own accommodations. So due to this incredible public ownership and public possibility to steer the market through subsidized housing, but also through pretty strict renting regulations, there is a strong grip on the whole housing market, I would say, that keeps prices comparably low, and that has also strong effects on the free renting sector. However, I think there is also within the city a bit of a heterogeneity, because not everybody has access to this social housing, and that's especially, I think, first generation migrants with lower educational backgrounds that often face troubles in entering this social housing complex, as well as homelessness, but there are that's a multitude of factors, I think, that contributes to difficulties in entering this subsidized housing markets. And that's also personal abilities, social, psychological reasons. But I think, the overall regulatory and institutional context is quite good.
Thank you so much. I noted down a very interesting part of a sentence that you said, producing the housing crisis. And I will give you a breather and a water break before we come back to that. But you've already mentioned that in Austria, 45% of the population are renters. I think Czech Republic is quite the opposite. There is a very large, almost majority population that are house owners. Eliška, would you mind explaining to us what, in your view and your research, are the main drivers of this situation, whether we call it a crisis or not?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So maybe I would start with the overall notion of the Czech society that we really face one of the worst housing affordability crisis in Europe, and it's because of one indicator which penetrated into our media, into the discussion of our politicians, and into the society, which is based on some data of a private company, and it's not an indicator of which would be used by Eurostat. So if we look at indicators which are used by Eurostat, the Czech Republic is somewhere in the middle of the countries. Some are better, some are worse in different indicators. So we are an average country concerning housing affordability crisis. Actually, housing affordability crisis has been discussed around the rich countries over the globe. From the United States, Australia to New Zealand as well. So everybody speaks currently within rich countries about housing affordability crisis. And what are the drivers, maybe specific drivers for the Czech context? I already spoke about the rental market and insecurity of tenants. But I would like also to mention, and also it's discussed broadly within the Czech discussions, that the prices are driven also by private investors, not necessitating their own home for living, but only investing. I see some drivers behind this behavior. I think that because we have in the Czech Republic specifically low property taxes, so it means the people think that when they buy their apartment, they buy it forever and nobody takes it from them or tax it. So it's not taxed almost at all. We also do not have inheritance taxes, which in some countries are very high. So the people know that their children will inherit everything what they gathered during their lifetime, and it will not be taxed after their death. So I think it's also a driver, actually. And what is also maybe behind, because we speak about that our young adults cannot afford living. Plenty of parents actually invest in apartments in advance just in the anticipation of future needs of their children. So plenty of parents, plenty of children already know that they will have their own home as well when they reach adulthood. So it's specific. I don't know how many percent of the society behaves like that, but I can see it around myself as well, that the people think in this way. So this is one of the drivers, the very low property taxes and in the Czech Republic. And what is discussed as the main driver in the Czech society, as well as on the Ministry of Regional Development, actually the driver of high housing prices is something totally different. It's too long permission processes within our planning, which delay development because developers claim, and it's true, definitely it's true, that they wait for the development permission 10 years, maybe sometimes 20 years even. So it's really something which tries to the Ministry of Regional Development to solve, and it has tried to solve it already for about 8 years, since 2017. I think that unfortunately ministry cures something, but not the real cause of this long permission process. But it's another story. But the problem of this thinking that the only way how to decrease prices is to develop more and to streamline permission processes in the Czech Republic is the long-term changes of our planning and building law, which is severe and brings a total legislative instability into our system. It's criticized by the planning experts that it's something really what we should not do to our planning law. And currently, again, our new government decided to totally change the planning and building law again. Now it's in our parliament. We, as the professional public, let's say, do not see inside the processes at all. The law is changed by a person outside of the Ministry of Regional Development. It is an authorized person by government, which comes from private sector. This person comes from big development company, and currently, most probably, is doing something with our planning and building law, which afterwards will be somehow dealt, but we do not know how, within our parliament. And it's not there are no discussion about these changes within other ministries, like the Ministry of Environment. and even the current Minister of Regional Development claimed that actually she does not care about environmental protection. We should care about the needs of our people. And somehow she forgot that the needs of our people is also environmental protection. So I am really worried. Your question contained also worries about what I'm worried about. So I'm worried about how our planning law would be written, what it would mean, for instance, for environmental protection. It would probably streamline the processes and we would develop more, but one of my worries is the consequences to environmental protection in the Czech Republic. And the second worry is that even if we streamline these processes, the new development will occur in 10, 20 years, and I think it will be too late for doing something with our housing affordability crisis, because maybe in 20 years we will be over this problem. We are facing totally different situation currently in the Czech Republic with population decline. We, as the Czech population without immigration, we already face the declining population. We have 1.25 children per one woman currently, which makes our society to diminish very quickly, actually. And we will have plenty of housing units in some regions if we really would streamline the processes everywhere and would be happy to build everywhere. It will bring more problems in the future than solutions. So I think it might help Prague to develop more, but it will not help regions which suffer from shrinking already now.
Thank you so much, Eliška. If I may stay with you for a second. So I will refrain from comments regarding the Ministry of Environment, because then we could be here until midnight. But you've highlighted many very important aspects of what does the housing crisis look like in Czech Republic, what are its drivers and what worries you. And taking a little magical wand, what types of government intervention or even public-private partnership activities and strategies do you think could help? Based on your intervention just now, I think you mentioned revision of taxes, some sort of foreign ownership, the process of permitting, maybe also differentiation, a different approach between Prague and the remaining so-called regions. Would you elaborate on some of these when thinking about how to fix this approach?
Well, I think we actually as a society need very easy and cheap, quick fixes to housing affordability. And when it comes to this, I have something in mind, and I think I am not the only one. Also, we had a group called NERV in the Czech Republic, which provided also some material what we should do with housing affordability crisis. And I think what I will tell you, they also included in there, but I'm not sure already now. I already do not know. But I think they also discussed the renting market, that it should be changed and more secure for tenants. But what I would add definitely is, because Prague is a hotspot and is also a touristic magnet for tourists coming here, and plenty of housing units in the city center were rebuilt, refurbished to some Airbnb units for tourists. Well, I am for regulation of this, at least temporarily. When we would already not have housing affordability crisis, we might relax it as well. But why to keep it in the tourism sector when we can have it for our own families? So that's what I would suggest as well. And then we would need some structural fixes, which would be the change of our taxation system, more focusing on property taxation and less focusing on income taxation. That would be one of my wishes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Going back to you, Lucas, I would like to ask you, you mentioned the Red Vienna. During my master's degree in Vienna, I attended a wonderful exhibition and stood in one of the kitchens, apparently, that was installed. If we cannot time travel in cities that are not Vienna and implement such wonderful housing policy that is partially financed from taxes, if I'm not mistaken, what can other cities do? In other words, what would be your magical wand solution going forward? How to not produce the housing crisis, but alleviate it in some way?
Yeah, first, I fully agree with Eliska that we need quick fixes first. And I think building construction is something important, something to consider, but not the quick fix, certainly. I think first and foremost, probably, and that has been done on EU level now, is recognizing housing as a right and not primarily as a commodity. And I think that has some implications that we can work with. And one is taxation mechanisms, vacancy taxes that really foster the development of residential housing in existing housing stock. Or regulating the short-term rental sector, such as Airbnb and so forth, as well as developing already existing inner city building lands, which are often also empty lots that are there, which could be used for densification in cities, but instead cities often, or especially in rural communities, often tend to develop outside. So concentrating, I think, on inner development first and seeing what there is in the building stock and trying to get hold of it. I think that's the first important thing. Something that Vienna is increasingly doing, but some things in this are also not implemented in Vienna, such as a vacancy tax that you have in other states in Austria, but not in Vienna. I think what we can learn from Vienna, and I've pointed this out before, is that it needs a kind of consistency and stability of the sector. I think the Vienna model is only so successful because of its long history, because of the time it took to accumulate all this housing stock and all these institutions that are working to preserve it. Sure, there is some things that you can do to create this backdrop. That's the creation of municipal housing. That is also the support of limited profit housing. I keep stumbling upon this word. I think these are some core elements. And one other thing that I think is crucial and becomes even more crucial is to tie this in very much with aspects of socio-ecological planning, socio-ecological futures, to really tie this to other sectoral transition strategies and not see it as an individual task, because they more and more come to merge and come to matter together. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mikael. You're already grabbing the microphone.
Yes, yeah.
I would like to ask you, especially because Lucas mentioned the housing as a right, and I know that is the case in Spain on paper, unless I'm mistaken. So maybe if you could highlight what would be your best practice, since we do not really have a magical wand, but maybe we could wish for one, especially drawing upon your massive experience and the study that you've completed recently.
My wish would be to be Vienna, but I mean, I read another housing expert from Spain saying that being Vienna is really easy. You just have to have 100 years, the same party governing with the same policy and a ton of money. You just got to make it happen, right? We are not in the situation. So for us in the Czech Republic and in Spain, I think that before getting into the policy part, let me get into a cultural issue. In Spain, we say that para hacer tortilla hay que romper huevos. So to cook an omelette, you got to break some eggs. And which getting into the like housing realm, maybe it's gonna sound silly, but like for housing to be affordable, housing prices have to fall. It's really silly, right? But in a country or in countries where the majority of people are housing owners, that's super unpopular. And getting policy that will allow housing prices or housing values to decrease, it's really complicated. So first we have to wrap up our minds around the situation and make sure that people understand, maybe won't agree, but understand that for like the common good, housing prices or housing values shouldn't be rising anymore. So that's a bit of a complication. And then into the policy realm, I think we have to get into like the crisis mode. And I like this title of the film, like everything, everywhere, all the time. So that's where we should be working on. Again, like building more, and it's important, but it's a more of a long-term strategy. And building more alone won't solve the issue. We have to ensure affordability in like the new buildings. So if we are building more luxury units or more like really nice, units, so yes, you have provided that supply, but you are not affecting the prices anymore. So we have to make sure that this new construction is also like partially public. That has to happen with, for sure, I guess, some incentives to the developers, making it easier for them to operate like with like shorter timing, but also at the same time maybe covering some costs in terms of like, for example, urbanization. That's the case in Vienna. In Vienna, like when a new development is built, it's not the developers who are paying for like the streets or the sewage or whatever. In Spain, when a new development, a new like neighborhood is built, it's the developers who cover for that. Which again, it's an added cost that then you have to like translate into the actual housing price. So there might be strategies that can ease, to say so, and take some complication out of the developer's part. But at the same time, as they were mentioning, like this is a long-term thing. In the short term, I think we need to regulate. Like we need to have other strategies that might be helpful. Airbnbs, it's like a niche thing, but in big cities and in big city centers, it's really important. Then in terms of rental regulations in Spain, that's happening. So there is the option to like implement rental regulations, but then each of the regions has to approve that. And then within the regions that approve it, each municipality has to apply for it. So in the end, like if it's about 8,000 municipalities in Spain, at the moment it's like 300-ish, which are actually applying a rental regulation. So it's being complicated to see that. And even when there is a rental regulation, there's other rental methods. So in Spain, we have like the residential rental, which is like 5 years or 7 years if the owner is like a business, if the owner of the flat is a business. But then there's like a short-term rental, which is not Airbnb. It's like short-term, like 1 year at most rental. In theory, it's thought for people who are moving to another city to work for some time or for students or the like, but that's not regulated. So many people or many owners are taking their flats out of the like classical, let's say, residential rental and putting it in there. So there's like way too many loopholes to like the regulations that are happening at the moment. So we need to like have a bit more of a holistic, let's say, view over the issues. And then there's the part of like the incentives more for like renting and for buying. That might have a bit of a like perverse situation where you are giving money to the renter, which then gives it to the owner, and the money, like in the end, in the big picture of things, it's just a money transfer from the public sector to the owner. So it's complicated, but at the same time, there's a couple of interesting models happening at the moment in Catalonia, especially, where the government is offering the money for the down payment to people as a very, very long-term loan with no interest, so that they can pay for the down payment and access ownership in that way. Which is the counterpart. That unit gets marked as a publicly protected unit, so it's not, it cannot be sold in market rate in the future. So there's mechanisms to say so, to put like public money at good use, but we have to always make sure that there is, let's say, a public benefit out of it, because otherwise, again, we are just pouring money into like giving it to developers. In the end, like it goes through someone else, but giving it to developers or to owners. So just making sure that this public money is like wisely used.
Thank you so much. And if I may have a follow-up question. So if one receives this basically interest-free loan for the down payment, is there any conditionality to ensure that such a unit is then used by that family or owner?
Yes. So I might have the dates wrong, but I think it's for the first 4 years. You cannot even rent it. You have to be the one living there. after year 4, you can rent it, but it will be always rented at like a rent-controlled situation. And then, as I was saying, if you sell it, you are also selling it into like the public price threshold, so never at free market prices. So it's basically that what that means is that you can sell it only to the price you bought it plus inflation. It cannot go higher up. So, I mean, it's a bit of a like long-term situation in this, like thinking how it can happen in the future. But if you want a place to live and if you have to access that now, it's a good solution in the sense of quite a lot of people have the means to like pay for a mortgage, because normally rents are higher than a mortgage, but they don't have the means to like pay the down payment. So that's a pathway towards ownership that takes the speculative, to say so, sense of every homeowner. It's a bit of a small speculator in a sense, it might be. So you take the speculation out of the equation and you offer, let's say, home ownership to people, which again, in Spain, like into the cultural framework, psyche, it's still an important thing.
Thank you so much. That's a great example, and you've partially answered my follow-up questions, which are this access to financing, so that one can get out of this loop of renting and never being quite secure in their housing. Eliško, may I ask you, is there any good practice that comes to your mind, and it doesn't only have to be in relation to provide the down payment from the state, that you would like to share or highlight? I'm trying to make Czech Republic look better because this is quite an intimidating panel when it comes to good practice. But maybe you can come up with a nice example or something that still needs improving.
Well, I think we have good practices here. What comes to my mind concerning the land value capture, as you mentioned, as my area of research interest, is that although we did not have in our planning and building law any rules on developer obligations, what the developers need to give to municipality as a share of their profit, to provide some public services. From the bottom up, the municipalities actually made these rules by themselves, and it cleared a bit the situation among the developers on one side and municipalities on the other side, because these rules were made by the municipalities. Developers accepted them. These rules were on the voluntary basis. Otherwise, it was not. It was not possible. But somehow it made the position better, the position of developers better, because they started to contribute, as well as started to contribute on an official basis, whereas before they contributed as well, but somehow hidden to the municipality and intransparently, and actually they did not know how much would they need to contribute. So for the developers, the situation was quite difficult. So this bottom-up initiative coming from the municipalities, which started to claim the right for a small contribution from developers, they wrote these rules down, they started to make them happen, made the overall process of cooperation between the developers and municipalities more transparent and I think more pleasant for both sides. So I think we are a creative nation which can deal with these issues on their own, even if we do have a lack of legislation within this context. So this is a good case.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I also wanted to highlight the subsidy program for energy efficient renovations that is quite successful in Czech Republic, although recently it's been gutted by the its financing structure has been gutted by the new government. But let us not mention them. Lucas, I would like to come back to you, and of course the best practice is what you've been mentioning this entire time. So I would specifically like to ask you, how can a housing policy that has been quite stable for, let's say, the 100 years that you've mentioned, how can it be flexible to react to developing trends? And by this I mean not only demographic trends that we've mentioned, such as aging populations and smaller families, but also adaptation to and mitigation of the climate crisis. So maybe some sort of adaptation to heat waves, flooding, or maybe also the cost of energy bills in the houses. Can the policy of an area that is literally physically fixed in place be flexible in any way, and how?
Yeah, good question. First, I'm not a representative of the city of Vienna, so stop talking about Vienna in a minute, but have to come back to it from time to time, especially as I've also been doing my research recently on heating and cooling strategies in Vienna, and I think that that makes sense to bring it up here. So many points. I think a very good question of how regulations or housing policies can be flexible and dynamic, and I think again Vienna here there is a very nice approach of integrated urban development that sets the focus on understanding bottom up in a way the needs of society. And that's primarily this instrument of soft urban renewal that Vienna has been practicing since the 70s or something. That is reconstructing houses, reconstructing public spaces and infrastructures together with house owners, but also with renters and basically the population of neighborhoods. And I think that ensures a way to react to the life worlds and the realities of people that live there where they live locally and adapt to it also in a meaningful way and develop their perspective into the built structure. I think that has been also an important aspect of keeping Vienna a livable city and also prevented to large degrees questions of dynamics of gentrifications. Although there are some dynamics of gentrifications as well, but I think not as strong as in others because this instrument really tried to put the focus on working with populations that's there. I think then on questions of adaptation and mitigation, that's also interesting in the case of Vienna that has recently issued its large plan on phasing out gas that has the title Heating and Cooling Vienna, which we can translate to mitigation and adaptation because cooling measures can be understood as adaptation measures and heating measures can be like decarbonized heating measures can be understood as mitigation. So it's been working on bringing these aspects together quite significantly, and I think it's done some good work there, but we also see that there is still a little bit room to bring these together because often questions of cooling are mainly discussed in terms of public places, in terms of fresh air corridors, bringing greening to the city, and questions of heating are more discussed in the urban heating systems, decarbonizing them, but there is a lot of momentum to bring these aspects together, and I think that's an important thing to consider for being ready for future cities. And I think like we all have these scenarios of how like the climate will look like in 100 years. Vienna is projected in 2100 to have a climate similar to Florence, so that's like a really difficult climatic situations than now, and I think that also makes or challenges a lot the current understanding of our energy needs. And that puts aspects of cooling much more to the table, and maybe like in a couple of years we'll be discussing the right to cool as well, which I would be interested how this is being handled in Southern European countries or in Southern Western European countries in Spain, where this aspect of energy demand in the housing stock must be a very different from the one we're having right now. And I think that would be a challenge of the future, which we can partially understand like through listening to local live worlds, but also thinking in terms of future developments of climate and technologies. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Before I hand over to Mikael, I would like to highlight that this will be the last structured question coming from me. So if any of you have questions, please prepare them to the front of your mind so that we can give you the floor after this last question. And I will also ask someone to bring the microphone that will be traveling. But Mikael, I wanted to give you perhaps a bit of a complicated question following what Lucas asked you as well. How can housing policy be flexible and adapt itself to changing demographic trend, changing climate trends? And I'm especially thinking, since you mentioned the many municipalities and regions, 17 I think in Spain, there's 6,000 municipalities in Czech Republic, so this bottom-up approach is great, but I'm thinking about how to scale it up and how many people and institutions need to meet and just have a conversation. What's your take on this, please?
Well, how much time have we got for this? Okay, no, just kidding. So let me get first into like adaptation needs planning. And here I think Prague and Barcelona, which is where I live, we are a bit of like sibling cities where we've been trying to approve a new urban plan since 2013, if I'm not wrong. That's like 13 years now. And as far as I know, it hasn't happened in Prague right yet. It should be this year. Yeah. In Barcelona, I think it's going to be like for 3 more years. And that means like Prague is running with a plan from 1999, which is fairly old. Barcelona is from 1976. We are celebrating 50 years this year. So again, like we need planning. Like in order to respond to these situations, we need to know what's going on and have like, let's say, thought about it and an evaluation of what's happening. In that sense, again, Vienna, it's a good example where they approve a plan every 10 years, 1984, 94, 2005, 2015, 2025. Like it's as a clock. And it's more strategic for sure. It doesn't get into like specific regulations of what happens in every block or in every, let's say, land plot. But again, it does provide a response and an overview of what's happening. No surprise that I think Vienna, I did a bit of an analysis between 2011 and 2021 in how like different cities responded to like construction and housing demographic changes. Vienna and Barcelona were at the time comparable, 1.7 million, 1.6 million. In Vienna, there were like 9,000 units per year built. In Barcelona, it was like 600. So, and in Prague, which it's like 1.3 million on paper, but then like I think the floating population is really big. They were building like 5,000 units per year. So the situations are pretty different in terms of like housing development. And then coming back a bit into like how do we respond to these needs in terms of like the different administrative levels? I think political rift, it's a big issue, and like especially when there's not an like political alignment of like the same party governing in different levels, it's a bit of a blame game. So it would be interesting to see how we establish the mechanisms or the incentives for different parties or for like different levels controlled by different parties to align. So sometimes I think the national government in Spain is proposing things, but then they don't get applied because it's just a different party. And I think there would be, let's say, some specifically money-wise incentives in trying to wrap up these local and regional governments into doing some things. Let's say if you apply this policy, you will have access to whatever funds to develop housing, just as a proposal. So I think the political part of it is really, really relevant in our discussion.
Thank you so much. I think you managed in about 3 minutes a summary of, I'm sure, many years of your work. Thank you to every single one of you for these very thoughtful questions and answers to my difficult and complicated questions. Now I would like to open the floor and also stretch my back the other way around. Is there anyone who already has a question? Please raise your hand, and I would also like you to very briefly introduce yourself or maybe the institution you are coming from. We already have the traveling microphone ready. I know that the first person to ask is always nervous. Perfect. Excuse me.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth, and sorry, fighting a slight little cold, but I work in marketing for a big industrial developer, so this isn't really my forte. This is just kind of an interest and also a really big concern because I'm a human. The other week I heard this term for the first time called the silver economy. I don't know if this is a thing or if this was just a marketing buzzword that I saw last week. But yeah, how is it looking with the best practices, also maybe worst practices for how to deal with our aging populations? So maybe if you guys could talk about that. That's one question. And then a second question, if you're up for it. What about co-housing models? I have to say, when I first saw this title on LinkedIn the other week, I very optimistically thought this was going to be about co-housing and putting old people together with young people and combating the loneliness crisis, which is maybe a little bit over-romanticized, but is that also maybe a quick fix to do some type of co-housing models? And I'm sure that works differently in different cultures. So I guess kind of 2 questions there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. They were very clear. I appreciate that. So which one of you would like to take it?
So getting into the silver economy, or let's say the difference in wealth and economic capacity of like the elderly versus young people. I think in Spain there's starting to be an issue with that. I think you were mentioning that people are waiting to inherit their housing units. At the same time, quite a lot of old people end up using their housing unit to finance or to pay for their care. So let's watch out with this kind of like loopholes between, or like dynamics with elderly people, which some of them have like more than one apartment and they can rent one. And I mean, for sure, maybe some young people, they might claim that they are getting way too much money, but some of them are putting all of their, let's say, equity or all of their owned properties into their care. So we have to be careful in not doing generalizations in that. And in terms of co-housing and like other cooperative models, I mean, some of them are like co-housing in terms of mixing generations. In Spain, there has been like some of the municipalities are pretty proactive in these kind of models, and they are nice and they are really interesting. However, generalizing that, I mean, it's like a drop in the bucket. For sure, it's important and it's really nice, not only because of its like housing implications, but also because of the social ones. But again, it's just a little small thing. At the same time, in more like in the things, cooperatives are also another big thing that in some Spanish municipalities are trying to promote. And they are, again, really nice, but especially because it's not that they own the house when they develop it. It's more of a like right to use what they end up having. And it turns out to be much more affordable. But at the same time, these are kind of solutions that it's really difficult to scale in a, let's say, meaningful way across the board.
Yeah, maybe I can add to this and also bring up another dimension that we haven't talked about, and that is that we often see that, especially I think in single-family homes, but also in the building stock in cities, that often older generations occupy a lot of space because they've used to live with large families in these houses, and families are shrinking, and it's difficult to change houses at that age because often either you have a old housing contract or you have some memories and are tied to that place. And I think it needs a lot of incentivizing to change these places and make space in a way that sounds crude, but I mean it's like in a nice way to change these places. And I think that needs a lot of incentivizing the change and changing it to live in communities which are also much more accessible to older aged people. And I think a model for this that we see developing in Austria is with limited profit housing or building corporations or cooperatives, that get together and develop these kinds of social models of living together and that have more fluctuations with the younger generations tied in or living together with older generations. And I think that can be a driver also, on the other hand, to reduce housing crisis for younger or middle-aged generations. Yeah.
Eliško, I wanted to give you the floor if you would like to add anything, because you did mention in your interventions that Czech Republic, especially native Czech population, is decreasing, shrinking, and there definitely is also, let's say, a silver economy issue at play. Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, the issue is definitely on the table. But to be honest, I am not an expert into it, and I cannot find any good case which we would develop in the Czech Republic in terms of, for instance, some type of co-housing. We are, I think, at the beginning of this path. I know that the state fund, which with the aim of funding affordable housing, is actually at the start of defining what it would mean and how it will go and on which areas they will focus. So maybe they will find also these ways how to support this type of housing or how to approach specifically the older seniors in the Czech Republic. But I think we are at the beginning of that pathway, so I cannot tell you anything like a good case from the Czech Republic now, or at least I don't know about it.
Well, maybe by the time we are all old and shrunken, we will have students from Charles University living with us. We don't know. With that lovely image in mind, there's a gentleman on the bench, and then we had someone in the back as well. So let's and in the front. So let's maybe take 3 questions if we can, and then we'll answer them. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting discussion. My name is Heinz. I'm living here in Prague, but as you can hear, I'm originally from Vienna. And I have a little bit an idea about Spain. Again, really, it was very interesting. And I guess, so to say, there would be more as a comment. I have children in the late kind of 20s, early 30s. And they basically talk the same talk about housing crisis because they're starting out. And in my age, kind of basically you could develop already and swallow that so-called crisis. Because let's not forget about one thing, and I think this is particularly important to the Czech Republic. If you look to private wealth in the various countries, so the individual private wealth in Austria compared to other countries, and particularly also to Spain, Italy, for example, is very low. Because renting does not create, so to say, assets in the private sphere. And if the Czech Republic wants to tax kind of housing, you're basically going to the model like Austria, that you are dependent not on your own, how you measure, master your life, but basically on kind of the state. So please keep this in mind when crying for taxes. Yeah. With the permitting, I'm totally with you. I had, so to say, my own experiences here because I developed that. So let's not forget that we are, at the end of the day, measure the things vary at our moment in life. Vienna has a strategy about 100 years. Spain is also, I guess, relatively long, and the Czech Republic is maybe 30 years doing this. So the expectations cannot be the same. The real life, yeah? And let's take out one more important thing, the crowding out effect. We actually talk about a wealth problem, which we think we don't have enough wealth to afford housing. But at the end of the day, all those 3 countries absorb a lot of people from other places because we all have negative demography. So I think we should keep in the whole discussion this as a very important moment, because otherwise we make exactly those kind of wrong decisions for the long future and devalue actually. Yeah, and we don't increase living standards. Because energy in housing, I mean, who was thinking about in the 1950s that cities will need more energy for cooling than for heating? It's a very new problem in terms of this slow-moving real estate and housing market. So I think we have to consider a little bit also other aspects than the political ones, first place.
Thank you so much. That was very full of information. There was a person in the back and then in the front.
Hi, my name is Pavlina. I am a recent hire at the Ministry of Regional Development at the Department of Housing. And we have been talking about housing as a right, and we have recently started working on the question of housing as a public interest. This is in response to the latest amendment of the construction law. And I wanted to ask if you had an opinion on the definition of housing as a public interest as it relates to, you know, it being for projects that are over 10,000 square meters and that have, you know, very loose sort of criteria. If you had an opinion on this, if you're enthusiastic about it, if you have reservations, and if maybe your other colleagues have also thoughts on that, because this is currently my research topic in my job. So, yes.
Thank you so much for that question. So we have the housing as a public profit, and then we had one last question, and then we'll get back to answering them.
Thank you to all the panelists. My name is Carlos Gomez, and I work for Utopia. And I can see how incredibly complex this problem is and multi-layered. And even if we ambition to speak about accessible housing to all, there are many social groups that we left along the way, and we didn't touch on homelessness. And this is just how big this problem is. But at the same time, it's a problem that we are now talking about in the public arena very often. And it's very difficult for an average citizen like me, to kind of wrap my head around what the problem is, what the solutions are. And there are many different magic solutions that are in public discussions, some of them more aggressive, more dismissive. So what I would like to ask you is to choose from your own national context, what is that argument that you hear the most and you think might be dangerous because people might not really unpack it well? It could be we simply need to build more, period, or tourism brings a lot of money, so let's not try to regulate it that much, or young people just want to live in the city center and they could live elsewhere. So I'd like to ask you to choose your argument and how would you unpack it for an average citizen? Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I will open the floor. You can decide which question to answer, maybe even both. Eliško.
Okay, thank you. I think the two questions first were related mostly to me. The first one was the critics of property taxes increase, which I wanted to stress as a good solution, and you stressed as a bad solution. Well, I think that there is a big controversy in property prices increases in the Czech Republic, and plenty of people, the homeowners, actually are against. And I am also a homeowner, but anyway, I feel that it would we would be as a society better off if we increase the property taxes and decrease at the same time the income taxes. If I understood your criticism correct, I don't know. I think you mentioned that the property, the wealth of the Czech people is necessary for providing them some security into their lifetime. True, definitely. If you are wealthy, you are more secure. It's totally agreeable. But what I am more worried about are the disparities between those who have an apartment, for instance, and those who haven't anything. So to increase the wealth taxes, the property taxes would decrease these huge disparities among these two groups of society. These people are totally insecure. They face high income taxes, and they do not have anything. They do not have any wealth. So due to a potential decrease of these disparities, I would vote for property tax increase. So that's why. And the second question was related to the housing as being in public interest, as coming newly into the current version of our planning and building law. Before I described that this version is being changed again, so we do not know how it would end, what would end up at the end. But currently, newly in our Czech building and planning law, it's in its amendment, it's written that housing would be in public interest if it would be at least 10,000 square meters big, the new housing stock built somewhere. And just to compare, we have, for instance, biodiversity protection being in public interest. So currently, newly, we would have housing as well being in public interest. My opinion is that we might do it if we say affordable housing would be in public interest, not the private housing. So currently it looks like some developer would like to build somewhere a huge building with at least 10,000 square meters, and he would claim that this is in public interest wherever it would sit, whatever it would be for. It might even be apartments in our national parks for renting, nobody knows. Well, yes, it might happen as well, because they would claim that it's in public interest and would destroy the nature there, because it would be at the same level as some species which are very, very rare, which is, I think, extremely. It would be extremely wrong if we had something like that in the Czech legislation. So I would propose, if possible, that if housing would be in public interest, if it should come there being in public interest, I would squeeze it to social housing or affordable housing or something like that. Otherwise, it does not make sense from my perspective.
So we had this question, these two, and the third question was perhaps the biggest misconceptions about housing policy, whichever one you want to answer.
I'd love to answer to the third question, which I think is a great discussion prompt. I think probably that puts a bit on the meta level the argument, but I think a big misconception is that social housing is for the poor and is an unjust redistribution of wealth from those who are earning the majority of the money. So I think it's extremely important to discuss openly how social housing is a central mechanism to provide social coherence, to bring together different parts of society, to integrate marginalized parts of society. And I think we can do this through a couple of ways. One is, for instance, in social housing, having paradoxically high thresholds of income to include other social economic strata into accessibility to social housing and to really meet in social housing accommodations and complexes. And yeah, the other one is maybe also really caring for high quality socio-ecological housing, which really is a steering mechanism for societies to bring in change. That's a big mechanism that public municipalities and governments have, really, to bring in their ideas of socio-ecological transformation into the built structure. So I think these are 2 points that large parts and basically all of society and beyond are really profiting from social housing, and so I think that's important thing to keep in mind.
Thank you so much. I'm thinking that we need some sort of marketing rebrand, because for many governments it seems like social and ecological are bad words that they wouldn't want to be associated with. But then maybe the ideas behind those would actually be welcome. Mika, would you like to add anything? Or yes, you would.
Let me get into the housing as a public interest thing. I'm not so familiar with the discussion here, but as I understand, this like a proposal to build faster in a sense and with less, let's say, red tape or regulation. We are in a crisis and we need to build fast. That's fine, and I think we kind of agree in that. But at the same time, let's keep in mind that whatever we build will be conditioning how people live for a really long period of time, and how our cities are shaped, and however even like people think or relate with each other, or yada, yada, yada. I say that because I think in Spain, right now we are building quite a bit, like in some places they are building fast. And we have this, let's say, building typology, which is called the zebra block, which is all of them are kind of ugly, I would say, as an architect, but like just white and black stripes. And that's like, it's a copy paste kind of thing. I mean, it's not attractive, but even like apart from, let's say, the beautiful thing, it's how we shape them, like in the outskirts of cities, not connected with public transit, no public services and the like. That shapes society. And these people will relate to others in a way because of the way they live. And it's the model, but let's not lose focus on that and make sure that when we are building quickly, we try to keep some terms of quality in like urban, let's say, layout. And then into the argument question, which was amazing. I think in Spain we are trapped between like two really like one-liners, and one-liners are not the solution for housing. And luckily it's like very popular and very easy to sell, but like build more and period, and regulate more period. And none of them work. I'm sorry. Like it's not going to happen that way. But my question is, why not both? Like, I think building enough, it's needed, but it's not enough in and of itself. We need also regulations because of this short-term and long-term dynamics. And I think, honestly, like going out of like the European context now and maybe jumping into like the US, in New York City right now with the mayoral change, there's been a big push into, yes, we will regulate that. Yes, we will build a lot. So I think this kind of focus of like getting out of this, let's say, zero-sum discussion and trying to tackle both at the same time, I guess it might be a helpful way out from this like blockade of, let's say, tug-of-war situation.
Perfect. I think since our event is being recorded, we could send it to Mamdani in New York and advise him. There have been many good practices shared tonight. I'm mindful of the time. We did start a little later, but I don't want to keep us from the wonderful catering. However, are there any more questions that we could answer that you would like to discuss in a group? Because you can, of course, discuss them one-on-one with the glass of wine. Maybe now, no, I have not discouraged the question. That's good.
Good evening. My name is Anna. I work for an NGO that also works with housing and with helping people socially excluded to find housing. And we also do talk about the European level. And my question is, what do you see the role of the EU, whether as funding for the initiative, for example, for the refurbishment of housing, or do you also see a possibility of a European-wide policy for affordable housing? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for bringing us a higher level higher into the EU context. Would any one of you like to take this? A big question.
Yeah, maybe well, we see a lot of development on the European level, the Affordable Housing Plan, Commissioner. So there's definitely a lot happening, but I think member states, realistically, member states will remain skeptical about regulations from the European level on housing in member states. Yeah. So I think there are only a couple of more indirect mechanisms that we can expect to trickle down, so to say. I think one is funding schemes that we'll certainly see developing at the moment. And the other one is more discursive level political ideas, I would say, that really bring new narratives into the member states and can help the member states developing coherent policies there. So I think, realistically speaking, that's probably what I expect from European level to really come into effect instead of strong regulatory policies or constraining policies.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have double thoughts with Europe, honestly. I feel like we are trying to, or cities especially, but also countries are trying to tell Europe to do something, but it's like the responsibility is yours. Do something yourself first, and then ask Europe to step in a, let's say, more regulatory sense. So sometimes it's more of diluting this responsibility. At the same time, it's true that sometimes the strength of the European Union is that it provides a framework so that then you have to go to your country and say, oh, Europe said it, so this is how it's gonna be. So sometimes it can be positive, but let's watch out with that. At the same time, 27 countries, quite a bit of different situations. I mean, you might say housing crisis happens everywhere, but the situations are kind of specific. In some places you need to build a lot more. In some others, the building, I'm thinking about Poland, for example, they've built ton of housing in the past 5 to 10 years, and the housing prices are higher than ever. So there's no one size fits all situation, which comes to, as Lucas was saying, funding might be the easy pathway for Europe to step in. At the same time, you might find conflicts in some countries saying, oh, why are you putting funding into that if I am fine, when other countries are having the issue. And last but not least, there's also another issue, which is urban-rural, let's say, divide in a sense. Housing policy is very much urban, I would say, in the big picture. And sometimes it can be difficult to sell that, especially in a situation where politically also the urban-rural divide is being bigger and bigger, to see, let's say, levels or higher levels of government coming in, pouring a lot of money into urban areas, which overall are richer than rural areas.
Thank you. So with this in mind, I would like to close the formal part of the event. Before all of us get up, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart so much for sitting here, paying attention and asking wonderful questions. I would like to also highlight that we will be reconvening here, Europeum and the wonderful Campus Hybernská, on April 14th. We will be discussing another hot and spicy topic, which is transport. So I'm expecting a lot of discussions about electric vehicles. Do we like them? Do we hate them? And before we all get up and get fed and watered or wined, I would like to invite Miss Milena Vicenova, the brain behind this entire endeavor, thank her enormously and give her the floor.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. But ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to thank our excellent speakers, our excellent moderator, you great audience, of course the Embassy of Spain, the Austrian Culture Forum that provides us with the beautiful refreshment. And it was a pleasure being with you. And let me add also my thanks to the staff of Campus Hybenská and our excellent technicians. And please enjoy the evening.